Welcome to the tutorial video for the expression of interest phase of the Battery Industry Acceleration Call. This video is presented by Natural Resources Canada's Office of Energy Research and Development. Today's session aims to provide an overview of the applicant guide and application process for this funding opportunity. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that the Natural Resources Canada head office in Ottawa is located on the unceded ancestral territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. While we meet today on a virtual platform from coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge that the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home. In recognition that many of the attendees of today's session are also tuning in from unceded territories across the country, we encourage thoughtful reflection of the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we each can, in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. During today's tutorial video, we will provide an overview of the Energy Innovation Program and the Battery Industry Acceleration Call, a breakdown of the call priorities as well as project scope and activity eligibility, an outline of the funding parameters for each project type, a run-through of the expression of interest application form, including allocated weighting of evaluated sections, and some items to note as you prepare your responses, before ending the video by discussing the call process that will take place and the requirements if your project is selected to move forward. Before we jump in, please make note of the submission deadline for expression of interest submissions. Completed applications and all attachments must be submitted through the applicant portal by 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, April 29th, 2024. This funding call is managed by the Office of Energy Research and Development, also known as OERD, which leads the Government of Canada's efforts in delivering energy research, development, and demonstration funding. The call is delivered through the Energy Innovation Program, which is one of the main funding programs of the OERD. Other federal departments, such as Transport Canada and Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, also fund programs related to clean energy technology. The Energy Innovation Program, which was first announced in Budget 2016, supports Canada's energy transition by advancing pre-commercial technologies and innovations that decarbonize energy production and use. The program has a funding base of approximately $70 million per year, with funding delivered through multiple targeted calls across various technology areas, as well as other unique program streams and initiatives. This call will fund research and development projects and demonstration projects that will help accelerate battery value chain decarbonization, security, and competitiveness for Canada. The call will also contribute to federal efforts to strengthen the network of Canadian battery innovators to help grow world-class Canadian firms in the battery value chain. The call will fund projects addressing one of 4 call priorities. You will be required to specify which priority your project addresses in the EOI application form. This slide describes the eligible applicants for the call. First and foremost, the call is only open to for-profit legal entities validly incorporated or registered in Canada. Canadian subsidiaries of internationally based companies are eligible, provided that the organization is a legally registered entity in Canada. Academic institutions, community groups, not-for-profit entities, and governments, including provincial, territorial, regional, and municipal departments and agencies, are not eligible to apply for this call. Additionally, note that an applicant can submit more than one application, provided that each application is for a distinct project. If you have questions regarding your eligibility in the call, You can contact us by email using the address provided on the last slide of this presentation. This slide addresses the participation of project partners in this call. Applicants are permitted to work with partners on their project, including partners that do not qualify as eligible applicants, such as academic institutions, government labs, other for-profit or not-for-profit organizations, indigenous communities or other entities, as well as foreign entities. Project partners do not need to be confirmed in order for an expression of interest to be submitted. Letters of support are not required in EOI applications. However, projects that are invited to submit full project proposals, or FPP, will be required to provide a letter of support from each fully committed partner. On screen, you can see a list of the 4 priorities for the Battery Industry Acceleration Call. Priority 1, improved performance, affordability, supply chain resiliency, and/or environmental footprint of batteries. Priority 2, demonstrating improved performance and/or cost of batteries for mobility and/or stationary storage applications. Priority 3, scale up of non-commercial chemistries, advanced manufacturing processes, and/or processing techniques of battery production. Priority 4, novel use cases and/or business model innovation for batteries. On screen, you'll see a breakdown of project eligibility based on project type, current technology readiness levels, or TRLs, area of the battery value chain, and call priorities. R&D projects must address call priority 1, while demonstration projects must address call priority 2, 3, or 4. Furthermore, projects must target the elements of the value chain appropriate for the targeted call priority. For example, as is illustrated in the table on this slide, eligible projects under call priority 4, novel use cases and/or business model innovation for batteries, must be demonstration projects focused on the battery pack. Additionally, note that the eligible current TRL for R&D projects under this call are TRL 4 or 5. For demonstration projects, the eligible current TRL are 6, 7, or 8. For more information on technology readiness levels, including descriptions and activity examples for each TRL level, see Section 12 of the applicant guide. Again, if you have any questions regarding your project eligibility in the call, please contact us by email using the address provided on the last slide of this presentation. Call priority 1 is improved performance, affordability, supply chain resilience, and/or environmental footprint of batteries. Projects in this call priority must use cells with at least 1 gram of active material and with a minimum capacity of 250 milliamp hours, present innovations that take place inside the cell and target the materials, anode or cathode active materials or precursors, a component such as electrolyte, current collector, additives, etc., or the design of the cell itself, and clearly identify which elements of performance, energy, power, safety, and/or lifespan, affordability, supply chain resilience, and/or environmental footprint are being improved. Any anticipated trade-offs amongst these factors must also be identified. Projects focused on pack design, integration, or application are not eligible for this call priority. Call priority 2 is demonstrating improved performance and/or cost of batteries for mobility and stationary storage applications. As the slide indicates, projects in this call priority must target a mobility or stationary storage application, use cells with at least 20 grams of active material and with a minimum capacity of 2 amp hours, present an innovation that targets the cell or pack design, not materials or components, clearly identify which elements of performance, energy, power, safety, and/or lifespan, and/or cost are being improved, as well as identify any trade-offs amongst these factors. And lastly, present an innovation that has the cell feature prominently in the project. The innovation can take place inside or outside the cell, but the cell must feature prominently in the project. For example, innovative EV pack designs that integrate cells with different chemistries would be considered eligible, while battery management system development for commercially available cells would not. Preference will be given to projects in this call priority that target underserved use cases specific to the Canadian context. For example, this could include applications in northern, remote, or rural communities, or improving energy equity and accessibility for Canadians. Call priority 3 is scale-up of non-commercial chemistries, advanced manufacturing processes, and/or processing techniques of battery production. Projects in this call priority must target the materials, anode or cathode active materials or precursors, a component such as electrolyte, current capacitor, additives, etc., or the design of the cell or pack. Clearly identify the current scale of production and the target output by the end of the project. Present an innovation that has the cell feature prominently in the project. For example, scale-up of novel cathode materials production would only be considered eligible if the project included cell-level validation. And finally, if focusing on cells or packs, the project must use cells with at least 20 grams of active material and with a minimum capacity of 2 amp hours, though note that validation in cells with less than 2 amp hour capacity is permitted for projects focusing on battery components or materials. As in priority 2, innovations in this priority can take place inside or outside the cell. The final call priority, priority 4, is novel use cases and/or business model innovation for batteries. Projects in this call priority must use cells with at least 20 grams of active material and with a minimum capacity of 2 amp hours, and present an innovation that targets the use case or business model. The project can use commercial batteries if appropriate, provided the battery pack features prominently in the innovation. As with priority 2, preference will be given to projects in this call priority that target underserved use cases specific to the Canadian context. On screen, you can see examples of project scopes that are not eligible under this call. These include mineral extraction or processing, the production of battery-grade reagents from raw materials, and battery recycling. Projects focused on these elements of the battery value chain are out of scope for all call priorities. On screen, you'll see some important information related to IP requirements under this call. With regard to IP requirements, please note the following. First, projects are not required to have generated IP prior to applying. Applicants may continue to work on IP during the course of the project. Second, projects can use IP that already exists from outside of Canada as long as it is licensed to the applicant for use in Canada. Third, a successful contribution agreement with NRCan will require that all IP that arises over the course of a project be vested in or be licensed to the funding recipient. And finally, Note that if no IP is required or expected to be generated over the course of the project, applicants will be required to justify this position if invited to submit a full project proposal.
On screen, you can see the funding available for the call. All projects will be funded over a period of up to 5 years. Projects must start on or after April 1st, 2025, and no later than March 31st, 2026. For R&D projects, the program can provide a contribution of $500,000 up to $3 million, covering a maximum of 75% of total project costs. For demonstration projects, the program can provide a contribution of $1 million up to $5 million, covering a maximum of 50% of total project costs. For Indigenous applicants only, the program can cover up to 100% of total project costs, subject to the same maximum dollar amounts for each project type. Please note that stacking of funding, that is, the total government support for a project, will be supported up to a maximum of 100% of eligible expenditures. The link to the applicant portal is noted on screen and can also be accessed through the applicant guide. To start an application, you'll be required to register or sign in using a GC key or sign in through your bank account. If you have any questions specifically related to technical support for the applicant portal, please contact the email address on this slide. Note that this mailbox is for issues related to the use of the portal only. On screen, you can see the list of the pages and sections of the expression of interest that you will have access to once you open a new application on the application portal. We will take a closer look at the evaluated sections on the next slide, but it's important to note that all sections are important, even the ones that are not evaluated, as they may still be used to assess the eligibility of your project. On screen, you can see the points allocated to each section of the EOI application form. Note the difference between R&D and demonstration for some of the sections. This is a competitive process. Projects will be evaluated according to the scoring outlined in the application form, and projects that best fit our criteria will be invited to proceed to submit a full project proposal. On screen, you can see a list of additional reminders to be mindful of when completing your application. First, pay close attention to character limits, especially when copying and pasting from another document, as the text boxes in the form will automatically cut off any additional text beyond the character maximum. Second, read each question and its associated instructions carefully. Third, make sure to provide a strong rationale for current and planned TRLs from a domestic and global perspective, using the definitions in Section 12 of the applicant guide. Fourth, be sure to clearly describe the innovativeness and novelty of your technology or solution. And finally, when you're ready to submit your application, click Review and Submit, review errors if any, and click Submit. Don't forget to click Submit. On screen is an illustration of the phases of the application process for this call. The most important date on this slide is the due date for your expression of interest. All proposals are due by 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, April 29th, 2024. You'll also notice the estimated timeline for each phase of the call. Although this is still a ways away, we will now provide a brief description of the steps of our due diligence process. Please note that this will only be relevant for those projects that are conditionally selected for funding following the full project proposal phase. Firstly, being conditionally selected for funding does not constitute a commitment of funding from NRCan. That only occurs once a contribution agreement has been signed by NRCan and the proponent after successful completion of due diligence. Now, for due diligence, NRCan's process covers 3 areas: financial, regulatory, and technical. Financial due diligence requires due diligence of your budget. This includes the applicant providing evidence that they can finance their portion of the project and have secured other sources of funding. Also, please note that your project may be selected for a third-party financial audit to evaluate financial stability. This is done on a case-by-case basis. Regulatory due diligence consists of NRCan determining if the project is carried out on federal lands and whether environmental assessment and Indigenous consultation is required. This is an internal process. Finally, technical due diligence will consist of a review of the project's statement of work and the performance of an internal risk assessment. This is largely an internal process, but some questions for the proponent may arise. Provided that your project successfully completes our due diligence process, the project team will generate a draft contribution agreement and schedules based on the due diligence budget and statement of work. Your organization will be sent the draft contribution agreement and schedules for your review. Finally, once the project team and proponents agree to the content of the contribution agreement and schedules, the package is ready for approvals. Approvals consist of preliminary internal approvals on our end, the proponent's, signatures, and the final signature by the Assistant Deputy Minister, marking the finalized contribution agreement. Once a contribution agreement has been signed and a project has begun, the program has various reporting requirements. We have broadly divided the required reports into 3 sections: quarterly/annual reports, completion reports, and post-completion follow-up. Quarterly/annual reports may be a bit of a misnomer because reporting frequency is specified in your contribution agreement, but it will consist of financial claims, generally quarterly, and year-end reports, annually alongside the 4th quarter claim. The completion report will mark the official end of your project. This is to be submitted once all project activities, as set out in Schedule A of the contribution agreement, are complete, and a standard holdback is tied to the submission of the completion report. The post-completion follow-up will happen annually for 5 years after the anniversary of the project completion. We often receive questions about what funding model the program uses, so we want to clarify today that the program uses a reimbursement model. This means that expenditures must be incurred and paid for by the proponent in order to be reimbursed by the program. Please note that additional details related to expenditures, including expenditures that will be considered ineligible for reimbursement but eligible to be included in total project cost, will be provided during the FPP stage. There is also a standard holdback applied to each claim, normally 10%. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. If you have any questions about the Battery Industry Acceleration Call, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the email address on the screen. Again, note that all expressions of interest are due by 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, April 29th, 2024.